Hello and welcome to the CNBC TV 18 special. I'm Shereen Bhan and we're in conversation with Sarker of Mastercard on their India plans. A big announcement, Ari, coming in from Mastercard. You have been consistently investing in India, and the assumption was that post-2016 we would see a further commitment to the Indian market, because 2016 for the digital transactions space was a watershed year. So what now as far as Mastercard and your plans for India?
Well, thank you, Shereen. Thank you for having me. We're extremely bullish on India. You know, if you look at the last 5-year journey for Mastercard here in India, we have very significantly upped our presence in the country. You know, we've invested about $1 billion in India in the last 5 years.
Right.
14% of our workforce is now in India. And now we feel that we remain, hugely committed to the India digital story, and we're now upping our investments in India over the coming 5 years to another $1 billion. And there's a big component of this investment is a very significant shift that Mastercard is doing, where we are going to build our global technology hub here in India. And what do I mean by that? We are a global platform company, and our payments technology is applicable across 200 plus countries around the world. India is now going to become part of that global node, and this is a very significant opportunity for India. We're making that investment, which in effect means not only will we be able to service the India market and all of our technology assets, capabilities, our global network in essence will be based here in India, but it provides us the flexibility that we could service other markets as well, based out of India.
Okay, so let me break this down and let me pick up the headline announcement that's coming from you of a fresh $1 billion investment commitment to India over the next 5 years. Between 2014 and 2019, you had committed $1 billion. Has that been utilized completely?
Absolutely. We have utilized that. We've made acquisitions. We've created very significant presence of our technology centers. And I think now we are really looking of adding that extra billion, given the confidence that we've had over the last 5 years.
So break up this fresh $1 billion investment plan for me. How much of it is going to go into the sort of spreading out of the existing infrastructure? How much of this will be used for this global technology center that you're talking about? What will it mean in terms of workforce addition, etc.?
So, roughly around 350 odd million plus will be earmarked for building of this global technology node. And then there's roughly about another 650, which will be expansion of our existing presence in India. We're also looking at some partnerships across India, which will mean more investments into our partners. And really the lens with which we are doing this is, how are we creating an ecosystem beyond just payments? And I think that's where our energy and focus is going to be.
I'll come to the ecosystem in just a bit, but you were talking about enhancing existing partnerships and perhaps also inking fresh partnerships. So what is the fresh target now as far as the merchant network is concerned?
So, the merchant network story has been a phenomenal story for India. If you look at pre-demonetization, India's merchant base was about 1.3 million merchants. Today, we are in the north of 5 million range. Now, given some of the very significant targets that many of the banking partners, the acquirers in the industry, and some of the new telcos who've come in, we think the merchant universe story over the next 5 years will see significant transformation. The 5 million could well look like 15 million in the next 5 years, and that's a very significant step up for India as a whole.
Okay, that's the aspiration, but let me ask you about trends. And since you talked about 2016 and how this space, the digital transaction space, has seen a significant growth, particularly in 2016 when we saw that big jump on account of demonetization. So what are the trends that you're currently observing? Because cash is back in the system. Perhaps the delta is not as large as it would have been had demonetization not happened. But what are the trends that you're observing specifically when it comes to card usage? Credit card continues to grow. 26% in FY18, which is perhaps the best in the last 5 years, but debit card not so. Growth of just about 8% in FY18. So what are the trends that you're seeing in this space?
So I think, Shereen, what is important to note is that pre-demonetization, if you look at debit card purchase volume numbers, went up 300% post-demonetization. I'd say for the first 2 quarters post-demonetization, the watermark went up 300%.
Right.
Now, there was an expectation that once cash was coming back into the economy, that you will see a decline in those volumes. Yet it'll be higher than where we were traditionally, but it would certainly come down from the peak period of
Right.
demonetization. Interestingly enough, that has not happened. You've continued to sustain the volume lift that we saw during those very critical months post-demonetization. Yes, of course, you're not going to see 300% growth every year. We saw some fairly robust growth in 2017.
Yeah.
2018, you're right, the growth rates have slowed down.
Yeah.
But as far as, we look at our network, the MasterCard network, we are seeing, growth as far as purchase volume in that 20% odd range. And then you're right, credit is growing at a faster pace. But not too long ago, debit card volumes were only a fraction of credit card volumes. Today, debit card volumes are actually bigger than credit card volumes as an overall market.
But what seems to be getting in the way of growing the debit card side of the
Yes.
business as well? You're right. The 300% kind of jump that we saw post-demonetization, one would argue would not be sustainable. But what are the challenges for you to be able to, keep the double-digit sort of growth numbers going? Because as I pointed out, FY18 growth has slowed down to about 8% year on year. Is it infrastructure challenges? Costs? What's the issue there?
So I think, Shereen, if you look at, there are really three things that are, some of it is beyond technology. One is, one has to keep pushing the merchant acceptance base.
Right.
We've got to 5 million, we've got to keep pushing ahead to expand acceptance. The other part where MasterCard is putting a lot of energy on is the awareness into middle India, and you have to go beyond the big 15, 20 cities and go deeper into middle India, which is where a lot of our advertising campaigns, we've signed up Mahendra Singh Dhoni as our brand ambassador.
Right.
In the last year, we've reached over 500 million people in 8 vernacular languages, which is going deep into India. So driving awareness of digital payments capabilities and why it's a massive consumer convenience play, coupled with the growth of what we call e-commerce into middle India, is going to drive the volume growth story over the coming years. Now, none of this is going to happen overnight. I just want to be very clear.
Right.
But it's a journey that one will necessarily have to go through. I remain extremely bullish that whether it's the consumer side of the story, we're seeing much stronger volume growth in tier 2, tier 3 cities. We are seeing e-commerce growth at a fairly robust click. And in the e-commerce space, you do need digital payment capability. We're seeing a lot of usage of cards. We are seeing IMPS, UPS grow. And as awareness expands, I think the volume story will expand over the coming years. The merchant community is an equally important stakeholder. Our partnership with the Confederation of All India Traders, with whom we've been working for the last, I'd say, 4 to 5 years, is again driving education of merchants on why digital is important. And as we drive that education and we bring more of the informal economy into the formal economy, and the big power that merchants are realizing as they convert to the formal economy is a massive pain point for micro merchants and micro service players is access to credit. And if we can drive that formalization of the economy with working with fintechs here in India, how do you create analytic ability to provide access to credit deeper down India is a massive enabler, again, for it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you do that well, and merchants get access to credit, they can expand their business, and therefore necessarily digital adoption becomes a required need.
Let me ask you about something that we're noticing play out in India as far as consumption is concerned. And consumption has been driving the Indian economy, especially in the last few years. But post the NBFC sort of scare, the last few months, we seem to be seeing consumption slow down across sectors, whether it's two-wheelers, and now it seems to be impacting even the broader economy, FMCG, etc. Are you noticing any evidence of that?
I'd be honest, I think if you look at January, February, Shereen, we were off to a slower start. And there was some greater concerns when we looked at January and February numbers. Honestly, we think that momentum is coming back up again. When we look at our trend numbers on a weekly basis, momentum's tending, to be much more positive than the start of the year. You also have to keep in mind.
So how much slower was Jan and Feb compared to, say, the year ago? Or
so I'd say about 6-7% below, which was a fairly, and there was some gauge issues around. There was some spikes in January and February last year, and then we've probably have also seen, some patterns we've recognized in our data, which were localized, in terms of consumer spending behavior.
Okay.
We are now seeing that if you look at where we've ended March, and now we are looking ahead from there, we're extremely bullish that volume momentum is clearly coming back. One thing has to be recognized that 90% of India's retail payment industry is still cash.
Yeah.
So the movement of cash to digital and electronic payment is a very strong, what we call long-term secular shift story. And we think that that momentum will continue for some time to come.
But what are the trends that you're observing just in terms of consumer spending at this point in time?
Well, as I said, that we're not sensing any significant reduction in consumer spending. Whether it is consumer spending at a domestic level, whether it is cross-border spending power, it is, if I look at the last 6-7 weeks, we are actually fairly bullish on the overall growth story for India. It is not something that we are seeing in our data which causes us any significant concern.